Hello, folks. Welcome to the internet.
Hi, Internet.
Tonight, we're going to examine
Thanks, Al Gore.
Thanks, Al Gore. Yeah.
Right. I do appreciate that. And we have Bass Pale Ale, which was introduced in 1777. And I'm wearing this Phillies gear in honor of Patrick and in honor of Pennsylvania because he brought his cap out, and I said, you know what, I'm going to go all out and wear my Phillies stuff. Got to keep showing that World Series 08.
We don't get them often, so you have to enjoy them when they come along.
Yeah. Try being a Cubs fan.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Let's see the Phillies. 1980, 2008, and I think it was 60. Oh no, I almost said 64. Excuse me.
Oh, bring up bad memories for old people around here.
Excuse me. All right, now let's pour this beer. Now this beer is in different forms. Who wants to tell the audience about that? And then I'll introduce who's with us today.
Well, there was the in the UK they brew the 4.4% draft version. That is brewed for, I guess, the English market, and we're getting the 5.1% beer. I don't know if they get the 5.1% beer in the UK though.
From my knowledge, they do not. That was the original Bass. It's like they have it in kegs over there. You know, it's a draft version, 4.4, also in bottles. Also, from what I can understand, because the history that I've been able to read about this beer is a little sketchy, but when they started exporting it to the U.S. many decades ago, it was always that export version, which was around 5.1. Okay, from out west we have Beer Cub and Michelle Stitches. From the south. And we might have Paul from the Southwest joining us. He called me. He actually emailed me this morning and said he got the beer. He was excited about doing it. From the South, we have myself in Louisiana. Louisiana beer reviews. We have Brandon in Mississippi. I thought we would have the Brister, but he's not here. John cannot do it because his wife is ill, and I hope she gets better. Now, from the north, the old Northwest, we have Bryson. From the Midwest, I guess the North, we have Charles and John. From the Mid-Atlantic, Penns Woods, we have Patrick. And from Massachusetts, we have Massachusetts Beer Reviews, Eric.
Hello, everybody.
Thomas Metal. Okay, this beer, I was saying about Schlitz, John, and the reason I said that was, okay, this company came out, this company started in 1777, right? Brewing an ale. Then it got so popular, by like 100 years later, 1877, it was the most popular beer in the world, not in England, the world. It was the subject of paintings by Edouard Manet, Pablo Picasso. It was, you know, like a world-famous beer. Then, by the 1920s, you know, it started to lose momentum, and the companies said, well, William Bass Company said, well, we can keep our market share by buying up other struggling companies. But then all you do is have a portfolio of struggling beer brands, right? So it just kept declining, and I mean, it was still big, right? But it was still declining, and then in the 70s, it was still holding on, but not strong like it was. And then eventually, it got bought out by Interbrew in 2000, which became InBev, and which became Anheuser-Busch InBev. So, and then the British government got involved and said, "Oh, you're trying to make a monopoly." How can they be making a monopoly? They're buying a company that's dying. I mean, come on. But anyway. They said fine, and they made them give up Carling, because that was a Bass brand, Carling and some other brands to Molson Coors. But then InBev, and they had to give up the brewery actually in Burton-on-Trent to Molson Coors, but the brand, the Bass brands, are retained by Anheuser-Busch InBev, and they brew it all over the world. They've been brewing it in the U.S. I think for about 3 years.
There was a renewed push a few years back to really push Bass in the U.S. because it worked so well with Stella Artois, and you saw different Bass brands around, like the Bass Stout and the Bass IPA. But I guess the push didn't work so well, and I have my own theories as to why that is. I just don't think they marketed it. I don't think they really did a good job marketing it like they did with Stella.
Yeah, right.
I don't really. Yeah.
156 calories. Right. If you don't promote a beer, it's not going to sell. Most beer drinkers are not like us, right?
Yeah.
Going to go around looking for little brands and saying, "Oh, let's try it." You know, they're just not. So.
But you know, there's a lot of commercials on TV for Stella right now. I see them quite a bit.
Yeah, and it's a doggone popular beer. In fact, they got it on sale this week at Winn-Dixie for $6.99 a six-pack.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm in the wrong state.
That's a cheap
For
price.
numerous reasons.
Yeah. Well, that's a cheap price for Stella Artois. Now, this Bass, who wants to tell us about the ingredients?
Ingredient.
I couldn't really find much other than it was made with the original recipe, which I'm assuming is, barley, hops, yeast, and water, but I don't know if it has anything else in it. I can't find it. Recipe.
My bottle says 2-row malted barley, so I guess that the different barley makes a difference.
Yeah, it's a more high-quality barley, two-row.
Let me tell you, I found it on Jay's favorite website there, tapintoyourbeer.com. Now, they say, well, as far as the ingredients are concerned, they say ingredients are water, barley malt, corn in a British-style beer, hops, and yeast. That's what they say.
That's right.
Which you don't think of corn as being an ingredient that they would use in a British-style beer, but I don't know if they did anything with it when it came to America or not.
Well, it's used in Stella Artois.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also always been used in Leffe, Blonde, and Leffe Brun. So, everybody in Europe is not following the Reinheitsgebot.
Right.
Corn is used in Birra Moretti, which is a very famous Italian beer. It's used in Peroni Nastro Azzurro. Corn is used in the famous beer from Lebanon, the Al-Mazza. It's not something new.
No.
Just been used for a long, long time. People didn't people didn't start developing a hang up about corn until around 1998. I think.
That's probably pretty close to being right, Jay. Because about 1998, 99 is when really the people started really talking about the corn and beers, and until then nobody really knew anything about what was in a beer.
Look, the only beer I knew that had anything different was Budweiser, because they wrote that they had rice in the beer right on the label. So.
Right, and they've had that on there. And then I like how some people say, well, they used to not have rice on their label. Oh, no, they didn't? Well, why don't you go look at the old 1876 label for Budweiser all the way back until today, and they always said the same thing. Water, barley malt, rice, hops, and yeast. I mean, it was in German until like 1912, but it was rice.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's focus on this beer, y'all. And what do you think about? Because some of y'all have never even had it, and one of y'all Brandon was saying they used to make a Bass IPA, which I thought was fantastic, and they had a Bass Stout.
Yes.
Which I thought was fantastic too, but those didn't last. But let's go out west to Beer Cub and Michelle Stitches. What do y'all think about this beer? Have you had it before?
Yes, had it many times. I've always enjoyed it, still enjoy it. It's kind of has a special place for us because when we first started beer again in the 90s, I think Bass, Newcastle, and Yingling were the three go-to beers, and so any of those three I can always drink and enjoy, and it's
Wow.
I've never been disappointed in it. It's a nice, easy drinking, a little bit of caramel flavor, some earthy hops. There's really nothing to complain about with it with me.
What do you think, Michelle?
Well, I haven't had one in a really long time, so it was interesting to drink something that I used to drink all the time. Now that I have been trying so many other things, like IPAs and barley wines and all kinds of capayals, and it's really crisp and pretty dry, and not as malty as I thought it was in my memory. But it's very good, and we were looking it up, and it's really funny because they listed on BJCP as an ESB, but it says right here on the bottle, the world's first pale ale. And I'm like, are those the same things, or isn't that kind of two different categories, or did they cross over and some things,
It's really not that pale. If you look at it, it does look like an ESB, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If you go get a bottle of Fuller's ESB or what is it, Red Hook, their ESB, it looks like that.
Mm-hmm.
Red Hook was made famous for their ESB, weren't they not?
I believe so. Yeah, I think that's still their flagship.
Now I think it has almost a Roman meal bread. Remember that bread brand, Roman meal?
Yeah.
It smells like Roman meal bread. I love this taste. It has a nice hop back note, but it's not what you would call a hoppy beer, obviously. It does have a hop bitterness. I really love it, but that's just my opinion. I think everything you said about it is super drinkable, but at 5.1%, if you drink a lot, you're going to know it. Now, Brandon.
Yes. There's a reason that they cannot call it an ESB. I had this explained to me by somebody who is a JCP judge. It's because much how we treat Anchor Steam and how we call a steam beer here in the U.S., you can't call it a steam beer. In England, you can't call it an ESB unless it's Fuller's, because, well, Fuller's managed to monopolize that name. So you have the Pale Ale, which is essentially an ESB, at least the English Pale Ale. The American Pale Ale is something else entirely.
Oh, right, like a Sierra Nevada, totally different animal. And by the way, Bass holds the oldest trademark in England from 1875 when they started having trademarks.
Very nice. I like that.
What do you think about the beer? I mean, Brandon, you like it, or?
Oh, yes, I do. I mean, I like Bass quite a bit. I've always enjoyed this beer on draft. Certainly an awesome beer. I didn't mean to usurp somebody else from going like west to east and stuff like that. So, but that's pretty much. It's got a depth of flavor to it. It's just such an awesome beer.
And you don't find that it's inferior in the U.S. production?
I do not. I still think it's an awesome beer.
Yeah. Now, does everybody's bottle say Merrimack, New Hampshire, or do some people have Baldwinville, New York?
You got New York. You got New York.
I'm surprised because the next state over from me to the north is New Hampshire, and mine says Baldwinville, New York. I'm surprised how you got the New Hampshire version. I got the New York one in New England.
Yeah, I got the New England version down here, Merrimack. Strange.
We got Baldwinville, New York on ours. Baldwinsville, sorry.
Ditto.
Now, Bryson, I want to go to Bryson because he's never had it. What is your impression of this beer, Bryson? You were pretty excited to drink it.
Yeah. Well, first off, for the price point, you're not paying a craft kind of price point on the beer first, which is a plus for me. I paid $7.99 for it. Yeah, I've never had this before, and but my first impression, it just reminds me a little bit of Newcastle. Just the kind of sweetness that it has, little. What I'm getting out of it, I mean, when I smell it, I get a lot of this. It almost smells like kind of plum, just a little bit of plum in there, something, just a very kind of sweet ester going on there. But the taste, everything else about it, it's just well put together. It's balanced. I really do enjoy it for what it is. It's an excellent beer for the price, and I definitely would recommend it.
I think if you poured this in a glass, you could almost fool somebody that it was Newcastle, huh?
I think this, I guess after having this now, I think this would be a little bit more crisp.
Yeah.
Clean, refreshing taste, I guess, would be coming off this one compared to Newcastle, but they're similar, it seems like. But, yeah, I really do enjoy this.
Newcastle's more syrupy, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, now, John and Charles.
I go back to what they said out west there. It's definitely sweet. What you said, Jay, you nailed it when you said Roman meal bread, because that's exactly, it's really close to that in the smell. The taste is definitely sweet, a little caramely. It's all around just a damn good beer. I enjoy it, like it.
Man, that's interesting. And you've had it many times, I would presume.
I've had it many times, but I haven't had it in a long time.
Okay, John.
Well, last time I had this beer from when I checked was 2010, and if I'm remembering right, this is the original beer with the you add with the Guinness Black and Tan, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
You add it with a Guinness to make a black and tan.
Yeah.
I'm a.
To me, this would be a sessionable beer. This would be one of those beers that you could really sit back and just drink. I mean, I agree with everybody what they're saying. The big bread notes in it. It's big malt up front, not much hop flavor in the back. But I mean, to me, this is a beer that I give $10.25 for a 6-pack, and
Golly.
I would do it again. It's a good beer. I'm on my second one and enjoying it.
I'm really picking up the hops in the background. We're going to go to Patrick and then Eric. Patrick, what do you think about it?
Hey, everybody. I think I had Bass Ale before, years ago, but it's been probably a decade or more. It's been so long I don't remember when I had it. So, looking forward to it, I was like, I don't know what to expect or remember. And a friend of mine at work told me, he goes, that's going to be a little heavier. It's going to be more crafty than maybe what you usually drink. And I said, oh, whatever. Then when I had to pay $11 for it, I'm like, oh, this better be good. But I'm drinking it, and I'm getting a lot of maltiness, but it's drinkable at the same time. It doesn't. It's not heavy. It's not hard to get down. This is much smoother than I expected it to be.
So do you like it?
I like it. I'm not disappointed that I spent the $11. I wish I would have spent what you guys spent, but
yeah, right. Yeah, that's a shame. You had to
this wasn't easy to find either. I actually found this in a place I didn't expect to. Because I looked in a place that I've been stopping, being able to try singles, and that's what I was really hoping to be able to do. But
yeah, I was lucky. I was lucky. I got a single of it.
Options for finding singles are very slim around my parts.
Or maybe I was unlucky because I only have one to drink.
But the thing about it is, I mean, you pay almost as much for, if you're going to buy 2 or 3 singles, you pay almost as much for those 2 or 3 singles what you're going to buy a whole 6-pack for.
Yeah, you may as well get the 6-pack. I did that with some other beers this week. I said, well, heck, I just soon get the. Now, Eric, you always have some interesting comments. What do you think about it?
Yeah, they're talking about the Anheuser-Busch. I'm on their little fact sheet, and they're mentioning the term full-bodied flavor. Now, I'm definitely going to say, in my personal experience here, that this is definitely full-flavored beer. And I don't know if it's necessarily full-bodied, but to me, I like it that way. It's got a lot of rich, sweet malts. Got some definitely toffee is what I get off the nose in that bread meal, cornmeal kind of a scent. And a light fruitiness, but like I was saying in the beginning, I like how it's full of flavor, and it just doesn't feel like it's very heavy. It doesn't weigh you down, and it's just nice and easy, crisp and drinkable. And I can see why this was such a huge hit in the United Kingdom, because it'll go with a lot of different pub foods, pub fare, just sitting around at the tavern and drinking a beer. This is definitely what I would, want like this from Newcastle. Exactly like this.
No. Now, Brandon saying that he sees on Untappd people keep checking in Bass IPA.
Really?
It might still be available, but what got me thrown off on the check on the tap into your beer, and for the longest time, tap into your beer was showing the Bass Stout, and the Bass IPA. Then all of a sudden they didn't list them. So that made me think they got rid of it. But who knows? And I'm going to tell you, I bought a 6-pack of that Bass IPA.
Yep.
Man, that was so good because I was so depressed. Not depressed like every day, but I mean depressed in the context of what I've been drinking with IPAs the last 3 years, because most of the IPAs I've been trying the last 3 years have been so bad, So, and I bought this Bass IPA, and I said, well, I don't know how an Anheuser-Busch IPA is going to taste. But, man, it was so fantastic. It was so authentic, like you would expect from England.
Mhm.
It didn't
I'm
taste
so
like
over the IPA thing now.
oh, it did not taste like a can of store brand pineapple.
No, that was
It's
something
like
I wanted to
Pine
bring up.
Sol.
Not to cut you off there, but I think we might have mentioned it a little bit earlier in our conversations here. Now, when they say when it said that Bass is a pale ale, it's definitely not a pale ale in the sense of what America and the craft beer sort of a world, if you will,
No way.
pale ale is.
I think it's almost a red ale.
Yeah, it's more like that, or maybe even a light kind of a brownish ale, but it may be too malt. It may be too something for it to be considered.
I'm gonna tell you right now. Go get a 6-pack of Fuller's ESB and drink that and drink this, and you're gonna say, "Oh, I know what this is.
Yeah.
Yes.
This is
What?
extra special bitter. This is the same style as the Red Hook ESB, man. This is not pale. Oh, you poured it. You saw it. It wasn't pale.
Right.
It was amber. And me and John, or John and I, or however you say that in English,
And I.
John and I went to college, y'all. John and I,
You used to teach.
correct. John and I were examining Murphy's Red Ale yesterday. And you know, John, this beer is similar in some ways to that Murphy's, but of course in other ways it's not similar at all. But it has
It's got some contrast with that Murphy's Red Ale.
some what?
It's got some contrast towards that. Yeah, I can almost. To me, this beer is almost more of a red ale than it is a pale ale.
So you're saying it has some similarities and some differences.
Mm-hmm.
But me and John, man, we were like bragging like crazy over that Murphy's Red Ale.
That's an awesome beer.
But nobody else can get it. But I'm telling you what, if you can't get it, it's a shame because you are really, there's a lot of beers that people say, "I wish I could try it," and then I tell them, you're not really missing much.
Right.
But with the Murphy's Red Ale, you are missing something.
I agree with that 100%. That's a fantastic beer.
I mean, it's so distinctive.
Do you think that some of the people were saying they had trouble finding Bass? Do you think that has to do with the big boom in the craft beer industry? You only have so much shelf space in a store, whereas, 5 or 10 years ago when we would go looking for beer, you had all your big beers, and then, like we said, we drank Newcastle and Bass, and those two were kind of exotic, because there wasn't all that. And so now you've got so many different beers fighting for shelf space, and so stores are choosing to not carry Bass.
Well, I would say yes and no. And let me tell you why I'm going to say yes and no. Yes, because there is a shelf space issue. Like the manager at the store I go to all the time, he said there's only so much space. I mean, we cannot bring everything in. It's impossible. And what they have is humongous, so it's like we cannot bring everything in. I said, I understand that. But on the other hand, Bass was a brand that had been on the skids for decades. It wasn't like it was setting the world on fire, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Anheuser-Busch probably bought it for cheap. And if they hadn't bought it, who knows? It may not even be around anymore.
That'd be sad.
And to me, Bass reminds me a lot of Schlitz because it was like Schlitz, up until 1976 was the second best-selling brand in America.
Wow.
And it was one of the best-selling brands in the world. That's how powerful it was. And then it collapsed. Now, you almost have to go on a hunt to find Schlitz. We've got it at our store. Okay, we've got it at our store, but we didn't have it for a year. For a year, it was not on the shelf. Why is that? Oh, well, because Miller only produces it when they have time.
You go on the Schlitz locator on their website around here, the closest place that has it is like Wilmington or Newark, Delaware.
Wow.
Like an hour away.
I can drive 3 miles down the road and pick up all you want.
Yeah, but
Bing, 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 bing.
But Schlitz was just a company that had been on death watch.
Life support.
Yeah, for a long time. Pabst bought it, and it's barely hanging on. And Pabst doesn't have enough money to pay probably for paper towels at their own office.
Yeah.
They produce, I think, is that Schlitz beer. It's awesome.
One of the best.
Yeah.
mass-produced American lagers on the market. I think. I thought that, you know, since I was a little kid, when my parents would have barbecues, I would sip Schlitz, and I thought, oh, look at this. I would say, oh, man, that's good. And then when I got back into the beer world in 1996, Schlitz was always at the top. But I would go buy Schlitz, like for Mardi Gras, I would buy a suitcase of Schlitz at Dormax to go to the parades. And literally walking down the street to my friend's house to go put it on ice, people would say, Schlitz. You know, it would always stop people in their tracks, and they would say, oh, look at that, Schlitz. I used to drink that all the time. But they would always say the same thing. I used to drink that all the time. And they would always talk about how good it was. And so, like, I was in Rouse's supermarket in New Orleans about 5 years ago, and I was buying Schlitz. Oh, excuse me, it was 6 years ago. I was buying Schlitz 12-packs when we were doing that Gusto Guy promotion at the Superdome. And which we did for many weeks, and we got free Schlitz beer, by the way. But
is the Gusto better than the regular, or the?
I would not say it's better. It's different. Okay, so we were doing the pre-Gusto Schlitz. They're different, not better, different. But anyway, I'm buying that Schlitz, right? And this black guy walks up and he says, "Hey, man." That's Schlitz beer. I said, right. I had 2 12-packs in the buggy, the shopping cart. He said, oh, man, boy, years ago I used to drink that stuff. That shit was so good. Excuse me, but that was what he said. I was like, yeah. He said, oh, man, we used to always drink that stuff. So, you know, like everywhere we went, everybody had the same opinion. Like it was bringing back a flood of memories of them growing up. But for some reason, they won't buy, you know, because I guess they don't have any commercials on TV, but it was almost universally positive to people's regard for it. And maybe Bass is the same way. If you went around England, people might say, oh, Bass, I'm glad they brought it back. And you would say, well, they didn't get rid of it.
Right.
So, but like Schlitz, people say, oh, I'm glad they brought it back. Well, it was never discontinued, except during Prohibition. But like John always says, John Sharon, he says these kind of beers are a legacy brand that
beers.
You could turn around tomorrow and it's gone. Gone. Oh, okay, so my final opinion on Bass, I really like it. I mean, I could drink it. I always say to myself this question. I always ask this question. If I had to drink this beer every day for the rest of my life, would I have a problem with it? And Bass is one of those beers I would say, no way. I could drink it every day the rest of my life. I would have no problem with that. I could just get really serious into it. So that's my final word. Everybody else can talk. I'm not going to say anything else.
Yeah, I agree. I think it'll be a sad day when this beer disappears because it is somewhat unique and it has such a history, and you know, it's sad to see it so neglected, but you know, I don't see it ever surging back to the top of the import list or anything like that. So.
Nah, no way. Oh.
How strongly Paul agrees, he's now working on his second Bass since we started.
This is very good. I'm kind of surprised why it would have such a fall off, because I can't find any fault with it really. It has good taste. It's not overly malty. It's not overly hoppy. It's tasty. It's very drinkable. I can't understand why this doesn't get more recognition or more like advertising. This is good.
It's too subtle is the problem. you gotta be over the top nowadays.
Yeah, and I think this goes back to that original conversation we had. And I don't think it's one of those situations where this is a bad beer. I think this is a beer not getting the shelf space that it deserves. And I think you're going to see it come and go, and it's going to outlast a lot more before it dies.
And to speak to that, at our store where I work at, the liquor store, we just actually kind of phased this beer out. Not surprisingly, because it just doesn't sell. At least where I'm located in Minneapolis, we just don't sell. I think I've seen maybe in the past month, maybe one person walk out with a six-pack of this. So it, in a sense, what John said, and the legacy brands, some of these are just dying out, and I feel like this might be one of those not in the next year or maybe 2 years, 3 years, but eventually things like this, they're just not selling enough. I mean, if you slapped a different label on this beer, like say a craft beer label or something like that, I think it would definitely be more, at least more, they'd sell more. The advertisement, maybe it's just too old of a brand now to keep going. It needs a new face to it. But
you know, I mean, you take this into consideration, and you said it right. If you'd slap a different label on this beer, it would probably sell a lot more. And that goes in turn for a lot of these beers that we've been examining over the past couple of years. I mean, they're fantastic beers, but they're just not selling because there's more beer readily available that people think that are craft beers.
Exactly.
So do you think the craft beers have flooded the market so much that it squeezes products like this to the margins where there's no room left for them?
I would agree
There's so
with
many
you.
options out there.
they call it a saturated market, at least with with the craft beer products. Yeah, I mean that's exactly what you just explained, basically.
And you know, there's so many young people out there right now going, you know, they hear these people on Facebook and Google Plus and all these other things going, don't drink InBev, don't drink Miller, don't drink Coors, don't drink this, don't do that. But they really don't know what they're missing out on enjoying these type of beers like this. And
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, I hope people see these examinations that we're doing and go, you know, I really want to try these beers and see what I'm missing out on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I got a couple of comments. I think we had talked about at one point in time in this video, forget what exactly we were talking about. Maybe it was like shelf space or something like. Or I think it was we were talking about the '90s and beer and how Beer Cub could get this beer a lot more, you know, readily available. And maybe that was because in the '90s and maybe into the '80s probably that craft beer and, you know, I don't want to say exotic, but different styles of beer just were not really what was on the shelf. So you got a beer like Bass, and it was different than drinking your Miller Lite in the '90s. It was different than drinking Budweiser. People might have been attracted to it that way. And I think one of the things that maybe anybody can chime in on this one. I think maybe one of the things that's going wrong for this beer is when we get the version in the U.S. It's even though it's an imported brand's name, it has the imported brand's price tag on it, which I think is grossly inappropriate for a beer being brewed in the United States. That is being pushed out enough in enough volume that you could sell it for $6 or $7 a six pack. You don't have to sell it for $11 or $12. You don't have to
but
that might be where this beer has a future, is if the price point comes down.
Exactly.
Because that might open it up some more.
But
Well, I think they need to market it. I mean, when's the last time you saw Bass being marketed? And I think that they don't necessarily need to change it, but maybe they need to market it as an old classic, a retro. Maybe they need to appeal to the hipsters who like to drink PBR and say, here's an old classic. People have been drinking Bass for all of these years, and it's still just as good as it was back then.
But the hipsters love that stuff because it's cheap, too.
Yeah, right.
This is true. This is true.
And she hit right on the head. This is a beer that's been around longer than 99% of the beers around here, and it ought to be. It's a shame it's not a hipster beer, I guess.
It's a heritage beer. That's what we call it.
heritage beer. I
But
like
John and everybody else, they got a place in Hammond called Rindy. It's a little gas station next to the basketball arena in Hammond. It's called Rindy, and they had Bass when they were selling the stout and the IPA and the regular Bass. They had it for $8.99 a six pack. Well, I think this beer is worth $8.99 a six pack, no doubt. I mean, now $11, no, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying about that.
$8.99.
What kind of a moron would pay that?
I give $10 a quarter for a six pack.
That's a lot.
Of this, I'm gonna tell you, and I tell you what, I enjoy this beer a lot more than I give $20 for a frickin' pint of a lot of beers.
Oh,
Wow.
tell me about it.
Oh yeah.
Preach. Hey, but you know, I mean, really, when you want to get down to it, we drink a lot of craft beers, and so nobody can say, oh, well, why don't you try some craft beers? Like maybe you ought to go ahead and read our reviews on Beer Advocate, or at least mine. Okay, so I drank a lot of craft beers. I love so many of them, right?
Yeah.
But on the other hand, this thing here, Bass Pale Ale, can go toe to toe with a great number of craft beers that I've paid way more for.
Exactly, and you're right.
Like mud.
You can get on my Untapped and see what I've drank, and I'll tell you what, I'll put this Bass up against the freaking 1,800 beers I've drank on Untapped any day.
Yeah, like what's wrong with it? That's what I'm saying. Like,
nothing wrong.
Nothing's wrong.
Nothing.
There's nothing wrong with
what
it.
is the fault? You know, like
Eric, no way, brother.
What? Come on now. That beer was.
120 minutes over this any day.
I rationalized paying $11 for a 6-pack of this because I went to the Phillies game on Saturday, and for a pint of Budweiser, I spent $8.50 for that. So,
Yeah.
that's ballpark prices. That's
Right.
a clip joint. A ballpark is a clip joint.
Yeah.
That's another thing I noticed at the game. I had never noticed it at Phillies games before. They're selling these huge beers now that they never used to down there.
Oh,
Like 25 ounces and stuff at the ball game. I never saw that before.
that's right. That's right. And when I went to Major League games last year, a lot of them have craft beers everywhere.
There's a lot of that also, yes.
And, stuff like that. And you might see Bass at a Major League game, probably be in a can, you know. But it'll be so expensive that you'll feel terrible to buy it.
Yeah, the big
Went to the
can
St. Louis
was
Cardinals.
$11.50.
I went to the St. Louis Cardinals, and they had Busch beer in a pint can for $9. I said, who in the world? And then, of course, they expect you to give $1 for a tip, so that's $10. Who in the world would pay $10 for a pint can of Busch when you can go to the store and buy 18-pack? Well, anyway, you know,
It's tipping at the stadium.
when I go to a game,
Fans would.
when I go to a baseball game, I buy a cup of coffee and then I just refill it with water from the water fountain. I don't pay all. I'm just not doing it. It's a ripoff. I don't
I
care.
just had to have a bag of peanuts, and I had one beer just to say
Right.
I had when I'm sitting there.
It was part of the experience. But yeah, we were at Coors Field this weekend, and it's the same way.
Every Major League park is the same. I mean,
Boston's
in
terrible.
NFL and NHL and NBA, it's all the same. I mean, but anyway, that's what this video is not about. That. But oh
But
no,
yeah, if you paid $11.99
ADHD.
for a 6-pack, then that's $2 a beer. And honestly, if you go out anywhere, you know, even just your dive bar, what beer do you get for $2 a piece? So, you know, that's, you know.
yeah, Bass,
Budweiser.
yeah, it's worth it. Oh, Brandon, sorry, but Old Style was discontinued at Wrigley Field.
Really? Wow. I definitely have no reason to buy beer at Wrigley anymore.
Isn't that what you have at the
Abs
restaurant?
lost the contract to Anheuser-Busch.
Boo.
Money talks and sentiment walks. Well, okay. Now,
That's the American way.
see, I said I wasn't going to talk anymore, and you notice how well that worked. It's my channel, and I'll talk it from. No, but really, all seriousness, just kidding. Next week we're going to look at another famous beer produced in America these days, and it's called Beck's. And that is really a famous German beer from Bremen, Germany.
Hey,
Man, I love Beck's, man. I can just drink that stuff like mad. But right now I'm drinking Natty Daddy's 8%.
natural father.
Yes, I coined that term.
Yes, you did.
So, Natty Daddy 8%. Well, guess what? I did a taste challenge today.
What?
Oh.
Oh, yes. And I got to stop this because this stuff is 8% and I need to chill.
8% challenge.
Let me say one thing
That's
before we
the
go.
fast lane.
Hella Stoppelbach. What?
Let me say one thing. Hey, if anybody's got Esquire channel, and you got to watch it tonight because they're in Louisville, Kentucky, with best bars in America, and Brewdog is at Against the Grain, and we've got a lot of places down there, so we might be on TV. So,
Oh, wow.
Awesome.
Y'all might be on TV.
yeah,
Now,
we had to sign a lot of waivers when we was down there, saying that if they show our faces, we're not criminals. So,
No perp walk.
one more comment. Brandon, I'm going to Hammond this weekend for baseball series.
Okay.
Do you want me to pass by the Red, White, and Brew and get another bottle of Murphy's Irish Red Ale?
I was planning to drive on through. I was going to pass through on 12, so I have time to run through Hammond and get some myself. But
yeah, the Red, White, and Brew is right there on U.S. Highway 190 in downtown Hammond, and they do have an extraordinary amount of beer. Extraordinary. Mm-hmm. It's really unbelievable. But they do have the Murphy's Red Ale. And at night, on Saturday nights, oftentimes they have. Huh?
If anybody wants to do it, I'll do it again with you guys if you want to do it.
Oh, you have some more?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, oh yeah. Well, I'm always open to that. Yeah. You want me to buy a bottle, Brandon?
Yeah, why not? I guess I can host it this time. That way you don't have two Murphy's Red Ale examinations on your channel.
I know people might get tired of that. Oh yeah, you can host it. Oh man, I never get tired of drinking that beer and talking about it. Believe me. Well, anyway. You see I'm drinking this Natty Daddy? This is a foreshadowing. You see, in literature, that's called foreshadowing. And you know what that means?
Yeah.
One day, coming up down the road, we're going to examine this little number here.
I've had that. It's a good beer.
And at 8% alcohol, if you drink a 25-ounce can, you're going to sleep so sound at night.
You're cooking your sons and daughters before that beer review. It's going to get crazy.
And you're going to develop such a bad habit and have to go have a treatment, go to a program. All right. You would definitely be in a program. All right. Well, anyway, and it's going to cost a lot of money. All right. Well, thanks, folks, for watching this, to me, a very interesting examination. Any last comments?
Bass goes great with another bass.
I think a bass would go good with some fish and chips.
Yeah,
I agree.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh,
Bass.
what are you talking about? Boy, that is a certainty. All right. Thanks, folks.
Place around.
Thanks, folks.
Sláinte.